we're kind of at the end of our show just about, and I have to say I'm really super excited, and you guys are actually kind of all the insiders, because you're the ones who are actually, well, inside for one thing, but you're also going to be really treated to this presentation from Laura Fitton. I met Laura 2 years ago at South by Southwest. Our previous keynote speaker, David Armano, introduced us, and I was really impressed and excited to have her want to even speak at WebVisions. And a lot of times, you know, you're down there at South by Southwest, and you say, you'd really speak at WebVisions? And they say, yeah, sure, yeah, we'll do it. And, you know, you call them, they're like, well, maybe. But I talked to Laura, and through a kind of fortuitous series of circumstances, she became employed with HubSpot. And HubSpot was super excited to send her here, and she wanted to come. And so let's give Laura Fitton a gigantic WebVisions welcome. Laura Fitton.
I don't know about you guys, I want to see more flaming chickens. That was really kind of awesome. Good job, you guys. I wished my 5- and 6-year-old daughters were here to see that. So, Wither Twitter. I'm going to warn you in advance that parts of this deck I am going to fly through, and parts I'm going to slow down and tell little stories. So if I go too fast, if you miss something, don't sweat it. It will be online at slideshare.net/pistachio sometime when I next get to Wi-Fi. So the first part is the part I'm going to fly through, because it's the backstory on why the heck would Armano be introducing me to Brad, and why would you want me to be on stage, and what is up with my obsession with Twitter in the first place. This is me today, and actually the numbers are off. I think it's getting close to 100,000 readers, which really always freaks me out. I don't like thinking of them as followers. That makes me seem too weird. Twitter been very good to me. I got a chance to write Twitter for Dummies. I got a chance to hand it to Paul Rubin right after he sent his first tweet. That was a hoot. But not so long ago, almost 5 years now, I was so clueless it wasn't even funny. I really did then look at my then web developer husband and say, fine, Web 2.0, where do I upgrade my browser so I can see the 2.0 bits, right? And things got kind of crazy. There's a book called Naked Conversations. It was one of the first books I'd heard of. Next thing I knew, Shel Israel wants to interview me and do a blog post about me, how I Twittered my way out of nowhere. Guy Kawasaki slams Twitter on stage, says how stupid it is. I email him a very sappy blog post, and the guy credits me with getting him on Twitter. People start DMing me one day asking how I know Seth Godin. I'm like, no, I don't. And they're like, yeah, you do. You're in his book. Someone asked me to lecture at Harvard Business School. This was April 2009, to talk about Twitter as a serious business tool. I was scared shitless of these kids. Like, yeah, I would never have made it in here, and I know I'm going to talk about a very trivial piece of software disrupting the world economy, but bear with me. So needless to say, the last 5 years have been all of surreal. I'm a marketer, I'm a marketing consultant, I've always been a marketing consultant, but very short period I played a VC-funded CEO, which was funny and interesting. And please don't believe the hype, but I'm certainly grateful for the hype that's been directed my way if it gives me a chance to have a voice and try and inspire other people. So with that out of the way, 10 things I really want you to know about Twitter. Some of these are old, some of these you already know, some of these you know, but you don't know you haven't thought about them this way. We'll talk a little bit about some vulnerabilities, some stuff in the future. I've divided it into 3 easy parts to try and keep myself organized, which you'll see is often a challenge with people like me who like to think on the horizon and go, woo, what's possible? What could happen? What's exciting here? The thesis behind 140, why I was willing as a single mom of a 2- and 3-year-old 1 year into my divorce to go, oh heck, I have no qualifications whatsoever, but let me just go out and be a CEO and see how that works out, was this firm belief that I still carry that software connected to Twitter will change the world someday. And that was what I started out with. In the background, you'll see something, SOCDIR. We open sourced the 140.com data when HubSpot shut down 140, and someone picked it back up. So if any of you out there are going to come up to me afterward and say, hey, I missed 140, here's your answer, SoStir.com. 4,000 apps powered on Twitter, ratings, reviews, things about what these apps can do. I still believe, even though 140 didn't go the way we wanted it to, that not only will Twitter-powered software change the world, but that it already has started to. And we've seen that with some amazing, economic events, political events. I still maintain we are only just getting started. And mad props to whoever laughed and recognized that that's Karen Carpenter singing, "We've only just..." I won't do that to you because I'm the last thing between you and your beer. So here are the 10 things. Memorize them quickly. I'm going to click. No. Here are the 10 things organized by what? What the heck is this Twitter thing? Why have you been so obsessed with it on all of 5 years? Like, don't get me wrong. April 2007, I blogged, Twitter's totally freaking stupid. And so anybody have that reaction when they first saw Twitter? Like, I feel you. You're right. You're in with it. And just remember that the rest of the world is still kind of there. And we can forgive them for that. In May, I kind of got my first use case for Twitter, which in my case was, gee, I'm this homebound mom of 2 kids under 2, really cut off from the rest of the world. How would I surround myself with successful, interesting people? And that worked out so well for me that like 14 days later, I put my Twitter handle on my business card. And 3 months later, I wrote the Ode to Twitter blog post that I emailed to Guy Kawasaki that got a whole lot of craziness starting to happen and sort of led to the whole falling through the looking glass effect. So these are the 10 things I'm going to talk about. We'll go through them in chunks. And like I said, I'm between you and the beer, so I'm going to try and move pretty quickly here. So the what is the big deal things about Twitter? Luckily we're past the point where I have to say, oh, it's 140 characters. I remember a presentation I did where I said, oh my God, there's been 1 billion tweets today, right? Because Twitter was 3.5 years old and we'd finally gotten to 1 billion tweets. Now it takes like, what, 1.7 days to do 1 billion tweets? I mean, it's crazy. This comes fresh off the presses from the conference that Twitter held yesterday in New York, Twitter for Brands. Joel Lunenfeld is with Twitter itself, and he described it. The graph in the background, by the way, is even fresher. It's an app my friend at HubSpot built called Tweet Charts that lets you follow any term and get all kinds of different slices of data of it. So I said, well, what term might be big today? Facebook. Turns out it was priced right, huh? 0.04% increase. But as you can see, at the time I took this screenshot, there were 67 tweets per second with the word Facebook in them. And what they're discovering is the way Twitter is infiltrating media. It's just this amazing detector of what attention is on, where it's going, what people are talking about, the zeitgeist. I've sort of fumbled with this and for years been describing it as a global sensing and signaling mechanism. Even when there weren't that many people on Twitter, it was still pretty darn interesting because it was a bunch of nodes all over the earth that were human-powered, that were programmed just by human nature to turn into whatever was remarkable in the environment and to broadcast whatever was remarkable and then to relay it. So when you start thinking about Twitter as a global sensing and signaling network, things get really interesting. And this is past, but this is also very future-y. It's past because Data Miner did this presentation I'm about to describe almost 2 years ago now. No, I lied, 1 year ago now. And it's future-y because this kind of story isn't that widely known yet. The day we got Osama, there's this company in New York called Data Miner looking at the fire hose that is Twitter and a few other data sources, but primarily Twitter, and applying all kinds of algorithms, language analysis, mathematics, all kinds of stuff. It took them 19 tweets to form the suspicion that we had finally gotten Osama. Like, okay, so what? It's a rumor, it's news, whatever. Well, their clients were 5 of the globe's biggest private equity firms. And they were able to alert those financial giants 18 minutes ahead of the news cycle to prepare, arbitrage, make trades, plan accordingly for a pretty massive global political event. 19 tweets. With the right math watching it, you can see the things start to inflect very, very quickly. So that disruptive force on economics and news and politics is just going to keep getting bigger as there start to be more software with the power of data miner all over there, infiltrated into all kinds of different apps. That makes it sound like really infiltrated, throughout, permeating everywhere. Another thing about Twitter that I think is really, really different, that amuses me to no end to watch, because there's still this obsession with clout score and number of followers and publicists pitching influencers and trying to get influencers to make things go viral and all that. One of the things I love about Twitter is that doesn't work that well on Twitter. On Twitter, the influencer model is subverted, and the message itself can become the influencer. And if you don't believe me, now granted, this is an edge case, right? This is a pretty amazing piece of content. Dude had 29 followers. His followers didn't even necessarily see this picture or know that this piece of content had been posted. Yet within 20 minutes, he was an internationally published photojournalist. This is Jans Krums, who was on one of the ferries that went to rescue the people off of Sully's airplane. What happened was somebody in an office tower looked out in the river, went, holy fucking shit, there's a plane in the Hudson, and then went, I bet there's something about that on Twitter, and searched it. So the idea was this remote node was able to immediately put something on the web in a findable way, such that a piece of content that remarkable could come from a very quiet, remote edge of the network and permeate, explode, hit the entire network very, very quickly. And I love that about Twitter, because I think it puts, well, I'll get to a little pebble analogy in a few minutes, but I think it puts the mere mortal in a sense of control and opportunity that we've never had before. And I refer to this phenomenon as any-to-many. Media economics have been determined by one-to-many, dragging attention onto yourself, being a showboat, forcing advertising down people's throats for way too long. And I love that with Twitter, and yes, other real-time technologies, Google Plus is capable of this. Facebook is capable, but it doesn't have the same message propagation properties we see on Twitter. The thing can come from anywhere, and we don't know where the next amazing breakout piece of content is going to come from. Something incredible could be happening around the globe, and there could be somebody wandering along and see it, remark on it, post it up there, make it findable. So in an any-to-many world, what is the economic model for media? We have no idea yet. And that to me is a pretty exciting and interesting thing. I'll give you some illustration of this principle in action. Anybody know which, well, I won't joke with the astronomy reference, which exploding star this is? This is actually a representation done by a company called Social Flow in New York of the tweet that finally radiated out the Osama news. You can tell I had a keynote right after that news event. So it was a guy named Keith Urban. He was not the first person in government to tweet the suspicion that it was Osama. He was not the first journalist. There was nothing really mathematically predictable about Keith Urban as an influencer. It was just the right tone of voice, the right moment, and just enough credibility, because he had some affiliation with Rumsfeld's office, that his tweet becomes the center of this explosive force, even though there's a bunch of journalists tweeting essentially the same thing in the 9-12 minutes leading up to this event horizon. And this explosion is just instant, going from Keith Urban's tweet to everybody you see in there. And I should know the number offhand of how many tweets you're looking at, but I don't. I should find it out. It's so instant, that any-to-many. You don't know where it's coming from. Why is that exciting? Well, all right, we're fired up about Facebook today. Facebook is so primarily browser-driven, and yes, they have a mobile experience, and yes, 40% of their users are on mobile, but that's still a straight-up smartphone mobile experience. There are 5 billion dumb phones, feature phones, phones that can simply send a text in the world, 5 billion of them. And think back to the printing press. Because Twitter allows you to publish a web page in 4 text messages, 5 billion people today in the world could be publishers. And that's been the case for 5 years. And people don't even really know it yet. A lot of people don't even know about the text functionality of Twitter. For example, let's say this was a crowd of non-techies, none of you were on Twitter. I got you all fired up about something, and I said, take out your phones and send the letters F, space, and the word pistachio to 40404. The entire audience has now just subscribed to my tweets without even joining Twitter. They're simply going to get an SMS update. That is incredibly powerful, and I think drastically underestimated even still. The combination of the message being the influencer, the any to the many, and oh, by the way, 5 billion potential publishers. Think how the world economy was changed by the printing press or the telegraph. You know, forget what can I say in 140 characters. 5 billion people can put up a web page by sending 4 text messages. The short codes that Twitter owns, global, are almost universal. It's like dial tone for data. It's absolutely incredible. When Katie Stanton first got to Twitter from the US Department of State, where she was responsible for some incredible things like the Red Cross texting relief to Haiti, who here donated through their phone, right? She got to Twitter and said, holy crap. The biggest problem we had in the State Department was setting up a short code and getting all this in line. Twitter's already got it. We're already blanketing the globe with it. So some pretty cool and interesting possibilities, because when you think, again, my last Osama reference, now he was in an internet cafe and he was on a laptop, but he could have been the dude with the cell phone. Just the innocent bystander who sees something remarkable and starts posting about it. He had no idea he was live tweeting the Osama raid. And at the time, nobody else did either. But boy, as soon as the world media got a hold of the story, this guy's phone rang off the hook. He was the witness on the ground for dozens and dozens of outlets. And his tweets were findable, and they're still findable now, and they're linkable. There's a unique resource locator for every single tweet. It's a web page. That's pretty freaking cool. So like I said, pebbles, the balance of power, mere mortals. You could find something amazing. You could witness something amazing. You could have an amazing idea. And if it was good enough, it could go to the entire globe at once. We've never had that power before. That is so freaking cool, just that alone. So let's get to the how section. I want to give you 3 big ideas, small ideas, mushy ideas, credible ideas. Reject them if you think they're too sappy ideas. But 3 ideas that I think are really, really key to effectiveness on Twitter, whether it's a business, a person, a cause, political insurrection, you name it. The first is the simplest. Twitter is such a pub-sub environment. Everybody's one click away from dropping your stuff and like walking off and not giving a shit what you're talking about. You've got to learn how to turn all your messages inside out, especially if you're trying to use it strategically, but even if you're using it personally. And the difference here is my 2-year-old fell off a chair. Scared the shit out of me. And I could easily have tweeted, oh, my 2-year-old fell off the chair, I'm so sad, da da da. Instead, first I picked her up and took care of her before I tweeted, believe me, this is about 25 minutes later. But I could have been very self-indulgent and been like, oh, pity me, my kid fell down. Instead, I sort of thought about it for a while and played with it in my head, and the adrenaline cleared and I started breathing again. And my tweet came out, what do you do when you're suddenly scared shitless? And a really fun little conversation back and forth ensued, because that was much more about the readers than it was about me. There was another day, I was out on this walk with my girls, and I had my grandmother's quilt that I had as a baby, and it was so nostalgic and twee, and I was taking pictures, and I just thought, oh, everybody's going to be so charmed by this. But it wasn't until I started picking up rocks and throwing them into the water and tweeted, what is it about people and rocks and water, that a conversation with 75 people broke out, because we've all had that experience. It turns out what works on Twitter, I don't have the slides for this, but I tweeted one day before a keynote, the only real problem with hotels is that to get coffee you need pants. And I was just being a wise ass and not really thinking much about it at the time. And I came back and I looked at the tweet about 20 minutes later, and it had been retweeted like 45 times, and it had been people laughing and responding, and like holy shit, why was that tweet so resonant? That's the moment I realized it's a lot like stand-up comedy. It's got to be common enough that we've all experienced it, and yet absurd enough that it's worth remarking on. So thinking about ways, whatever you're putting out there on Twitter, and for whatever purpose, what can you do to turn the message inside out? I'll give you a straight up business use case example of it's not about you. You have a blog, you want to promote it on Twitter. Well, okay, let's A/B test it. Twitter account A, Twitter account B. Same blog, same post, same content. I write this great blog post, it's about, I don't know, dinosaurs, right? And it has this great title. And on Twitter account A, it just goes up with the title and a link. And on Twitter account B, what's your best childhood memory of a dinosaur? Right? It's a question, it's about you. It's still about the same blog post, it still links to the same blog post. Hopefully the blog post doesn't suck, because people would be really disappointed if they, oh yeah, childhood dinosaurs, and they click it and it's really boring. But there's a way to frame it. There's a way to make it all about the person reading it, because you're just one click away from them leaving. Your key to Twitter marketing or Twitter effectiveness or Twitter use in 2 very sophisticated words, which of course you've already seen 3 times by now, so it's not quite a surprise, but simply make yourself useful. How can you serve? What can you put out there that others might like? Point 2 of the how. And I'm all choked up because I love this picture, and I'm also laughing at myself because I've been telling the Twitter is like the Little Prince story since like December 2007, and I only just finally grabbed a slide for it. Everybody know the chapter in The Little Prince where the fox appears on the scene, and the little prince says, oh, you're beautiful, come and play with me. And the fox says, I can't play with you, I'm not tame. And the little boy's like, oh, but you're so pretty, I'm not tame. I think a lot of what happens on Twitter, a lot of the good stuff, the really magical stuff that happens on Twitter is taming, just like the chapter with the fox. And what does the fox say? Come every day and sit over there a little ways away and just be there. Come every day at the same time so I can come to trust you and depend on you. Do not approach me, do not chase me down. So it turns out human beings staring together, so human beings are not really well wired. At this point I usually run up and scare the shit out of somebody, but you're saved. You're protected by a stage there, Des. And I hear your presentation was good. People don't like face-to-face confrontation. That's very scary. And that's like caveman stuff. That's really scary. People like standing together looking at an object in common, and that's how the building of relationships on Twitter tends to happen, right? You're near each other, you're connected a little bit, but you're focused on some other social object. So I think that's another key aspect to the how, and I'll give you a really concrete example for that one. I really, really, really wanted to pitch Julia Angwin about my startup, because she writes for the Wall Street Journal. And I was following her on Twitter, and I was also putting my baby to bed, and she wasn't falling asleep. She was taking forever, so forgive me for being on my BlackBerry while I was taking care of my kid, but it was like 9:30 at night, she was half asleep, her head on my shoulder, and to kill time while she falls all the way asleep, I'm tweeting and reading Twitter. And suddenly this journalist who I really want to gain mindshare with installs Uber Twitter. Jackpot. Uber Twitter at the time has horrible location defaults where it immediately starts broadcasting your lat and longitude right up there in every tweet and on your Twitter location field. And I said, oh, Julia Angwin, heads up, check location defaults. She's since, in the last 2 years, gone on this whole big privacy thing. And when she saw this article run this week, she's like, oh my God, I forgot. You're the one who got me started on my privacy journey. Now, so I'm in PR for HubSpot now. Was I psyched to have a Wall Street Journal editor writing to me and saying, oh yeah, that's right, we connected. You built my trust. You earned my trust. You helped me before ever asking me for anything. So maybe for you it won't be your company and a journalist, but what are the ways you could expand and build interesting relationships on Twitter by playing the fox or playing the little prince, taming the fox? So we're in a one-to-many world. It was very important to buy the big advertisement, buy out the local newspaper full page, attract all the attention in the world to yourself. I make the case in the any-to-many world that real influence is gained by providing value to others, by providing attention to others. Maybe the content that you use to do this, if you're in a commercial setting doing it, is to make your customer the hero of the story. Maybe you do it in my more complicated guide to Twitter, by listening first, learning from what you hear, genuinely caring, and making that effort to, of course, be useful, to serve, to actually put something out there that people need. Couple of points on this one. One of the most cliched case studies you'll hear about social media is Dell, right? Like, who here hasn't been at a conference and like on stage like, Dell? If you don't believe me about the learn and care segment of this, I will point out that the reason they're so darn well renowned for their social media is they got attacked first. Like way back in 2006 with Dell Hell and Jeff Jarvis coming after them and the whole blogosphere hating them. But they learned from it and they showed they genuinely cared, and now they're the big stars. So especially any of you who are at a company where people are still like, oh, I don't know, if we do that social thing, someone might come after us. High five, man, that would be the best thing that could happen, because then we could respond to it and show how real we are and that we're decent people with a problem-solving product. Here's a question that drives me absolutely batshit, right? I have two wishes for the Twitter software. One, let my followers DM me without me having to follow them all back, because that's the only reason I follow them all back. You get one chance, and if you screw it up, I'm going to block you, but I don't want to have to follow everybody just to be able to DM them. And the other wish I have is just take that number of followers thing and bury it in the interface somewhere where it's just not nearly so bleeding obvious. I see fists in the air, right? God's sake, people. Besides, you don't want a following. That's what you want. And this is how you get it. Who knew Ben Franklin was an expert on Twitter? True story. For those of you who can't read this, I try not to read slides, but this one's so good, and some of you are way back there. Write something worth reading or do something worth writing about. That's it. It's simple. If you're in marketing, do it by making marketing people love. Right? If you have a company, yeah, your company solves a problem. I sometimes make people raise hands, but again, with the beer and the Friday and the sun, I'm just glad you're here. I'm not going to make you do it. Companies solve problems, products solve problems, and I go, great, does your marketing solve problems? And they all go, why would a brochure solve a problem? At HubSpot, all our marketing solves problems because we just want to attract the people who need what we sell. So we try and solve some problems for them free. It's no skin off our back. Make marketing materials people want and love and would pay you for. Another one of my crazy ideas. All right, so fine. You still want to know, how do I get more followers? It's human nature. We're responsive to numbers. This is the only frickin' way to do it. If you have 12 followers or 1,000 or 12,000 and you're not following back, you're not listening to them, you're not talking to them, you're not saying, oh my God, thank you, you just follow Friday'd me, that was so cool of you, oh my God, you just retweeted my content, thank you, then you don't deserve more followers. The more you cultivate that community of whoever it is that you have, they are the right people. Engage with them. And when they talk back, the people following them will see you. And when they share your stuff, the people seeing that will follow you. Take amazing care of the ones you have, and don't worry about the rest, please. If Laura ruled the world, right? Now, let's talk some future stuff. The humble hashtag, and some of Twitter's main vulnerabilities. How am I doing on time, by the way? I don't know if there's a timekeeper out there. Okay, great. Great, so I want to get some questions and I want to get you to your beer early. All right, consider the humble hashtag. Anybody remember when Chris Messina and those other guys first proposed the idea of taking the hashtag convention from IRC into Twitter? Yeah, I'm seeing some heads nod. And there was that website, hashtags.org, and you had to go sign up at hashtags.org and follow at hashtag and do about 20 different things to get the motherfuckers to work. And it was like, this will never catch on. Well, I still don't quite believe this one. I'm going to skip ahead 2 slides. Yesterday, Twitter, at their Twitter for Brands thing, claimed, and I have a hard time believing this because the number's very high, that 1 in 5 television commercials in 2011 had a hashtag in it. I guess it worked out, right? So the humble hashtag, I've been obsessed with hashtags for a couple years because they're like the flocking mechanism of Twitter. You know, like they don't exist, they don't happen, someone throws them out there, most of them die, but every once in a while they throw one out there, and whether it's, you know, oh my God, let's overthrow the political government that's being horrible to the people, or if it's like, ho, say what? You know, I mean, there's a lot of different flocks out there on Twitter. But I always pictured the starlings that I would see in the sky at college. You've ever seen starlings go through the sky and they're this black band that suddenly turns like a solid black object and then dissipates and goes on to the next thing? That's happening all the time. These communities, these equivalent, media equivalent and financial equivalent of Times Square. Like, take a moment, see the ads in your head and think about what that represents in our media-driven economy. Flash and form and disappear and flash and form and disappear. I had an idea for a website in the shower one morning. I mean, we all do, right? We're like, oh yeah, someone could code that. And I realized I didn't need to build a site at all. I just needed to throw a hashtag out there and the community would form and we could use existing hashtag tools. I read a blog post on Brad Feld's blog in February written by, and here it gets complicated, a fake robot dinosaur, fake Grimlock, about being on fire. And reading that post reminded me of moments in my life when I've been so on fire that I was stupid enough to go out and start an internet startup, my little Elle Woods moment. Any fans here of Legally Blonde? They look at her and they go, do you think she just woke up one morning and decided to go to Harvard Law School? I just woke up one morning and decided to be a VC-funded CEO. Ask me over beers how that went. But it really, being on fire, that just so resonated with me and I wanted to do something with it. So now I have a show. I have a weekly show on the internet. And all it involves is putting the hashtag #BeOnFire out there and inviting guests that I think are on fire in interesting ways to answer questions for an hour. We didn't have to pay anything. We didn't have to get any sponsors. We don't even have to be talented. And yet we have this thing, the humble hashtag. Now money is getting involved. ESPN just announced a pretty interesting media deal. ESPN and Twitter are banding together. They are the media now. And they're going to sell sponsorships to brands of fan competitions. Because people go berserko on Twitter during sporting events. They go berserko on Twitter during the Grammys. It's these Times Squares that are just appearing around the humble hashtag. Consider the possibilities. I bet there's some ways you could be using hashtags right now that you haven't even thought of yet. I hope you play with it and try it a little bit. This is the Rotary Club of the future, in my opinion. These hashtag chats, I mentioned my Be On Fire one. There is, if you go to, it's hard to read, but bit.ly/chatsked, capital C, capital S, bit.ly/chatsked, or you can Google for it. It usually comes up in a Google search. This is a Google Doc, hand-maintained. I know it says there's 621 chats. I checked it, and that formula in that cell isn't working quite right. There's actually 627. That's the Rotary Club of the mother-frickin' future. All these different groups on everything from like weight loss to alcoholism to professional associations to, I don't know, how do we be funnier? 627 different topics happening on a regular basis. And these are just the ones who know about this spreadsheet and have entered themselves and officially put themselves out there as a recurring Twitter chat. With Twitter for Dummies, I did an entire 15-city, defining city loosely, book tour that I could have done in my pajamas. No airplanes, no TSA groping, no rubber chicken. Simply visiting tweet chats and talking. Now, obviously, for that book, it's a little easier to get yourself invited to a tweet chat as a guest. But gosh, that was 2 years ago. There's a lot more chats now and a lot more organic growth of these communities. So some vulnerabilities of Twitter. It has many, like any good thing. Of course, probably the biggest one, and this is one of my favorite pictures I've ever found for a presentation, and y'all are the first to have seen it. Thank you, Mr. Dodgy, and your photo class. That is spam. That is spam decorated with vegetables and fall leaves. I have no idea why. But Twitter and the humble hashtag are incredibly vulnerable to spam. They've been a pretty self-healing network, but we still have a lot of trouble with the DM spam. And boy, are those funny from an anthropological standpoint, right? Have you all gotten the like, ha ha ha, this funny picture of you, or like, check out this video, or I can't believe what someone is tweeting about you. And someone clicks the link and, oh my God, I gotta find out what they're tweeting about me. And the link says, oh, give me your password. And they're like, I've gotta find out what someone's tweeting about me. And they've just been phished. So we kind of need to work on that. Hashtag spam's pretty bad. HubSpot was lucky enough to be picked by Facebook to do a 4-part webinar teaching people how to use Facebook better if they're a business. And boy, that first 27,000 people on the webinar, it's amazing to partner with Facebook. Holy crap. The hashtag started trending almost right away, and all the little like, hey, check this out, spam bimbos started showing up. The nice thing to know is that Twitter does somehow have a way, once someone tells them a hashtag's being attacked, they have something internally where they can turn a bazooka on it and fix it. I know this because The Guardian, the UK newspaper, had a conference in New York a couple weeks ago. And there was someone from Twitter there, and as soon as the hashtag started getting spammed, he sent a message back to the mothership, and all the spam went away. But obviously they can't do that at scale for every hashtag that's breaking out. So there's going to be an arms race. The other biggest problem I think Twitter has, in terms of a long-term vulnerability, is it's just too inaccessible for the average person. Think about YouTube. We know the numbers real well on YouTube. 90% of people just want to watch the videos. 10%, maybe 9%, do some liking, some commenting, put together lists. 1% are responsible for publishing all those videos. And then you have Twitter that's like, we want you all to be the 1%, which would be very generous in an Occupy Wall Street standpoint, but it's not so pragmatic for consumer software. So we need more recombinant experience of Twitter that your mother could read, that an average person would understand. And of course, the whole mother and technology myth was recently debunked, so I'm going to have to change out that slide. Twyla, I think, is a great example, especially if you have a small business. If you have a Twitter account, you have a website. You channel that thing through Twyla, and it sorts out what categories you've been tweeting. It puts up some nice photos. It pulls some of the copy from something you linked to, makes it look like a beautiful newspaper. I think Storify is another great example. It lets you pull together tweets into context and tell a story with them. Muckrack's certainly been very handy for me as a publicist, because this gives me all the journalists who are on Twitter, and this is how I can find them and stalk them and, tame them. And a free resource I want to give you is something called marketinggrader.com. This is something that HubSpot uses for our marketing, full disclosure, but it's just an instant report you run in 2 seconds that gives you like a 40-point breakdown on all the different things your website is doing well and doing poorly. It includes a ton of different evaluations, both about what you're doing on Twitter and what about other people are doing with your content on Twitter. It's totally free. You don't even have to give us an email address to sign up for it. So hopefully you'll find that valuable. Hopefully it'll give you something to go on in improving your own Twitter efforts. You can even set up an account on it and compare yourself to your competition and get alerts when they change stuff. I want to leave you with a simple thought, because Twitter changed my life so drastically. And it's one more cute example of what I think is wonderful about Twitter. Someone had told me they believed in me, and I was really moved by it. And I threw this tweet out there, and the unicorns and the rainbows and everything started flying. And my friend Joey, who I actually didn't really know then, sent it back to me, and I'm like, damn it, yeah. Keep spreading it. Keep sharing with other people what you find exciting. Thank you all very much. I hope the beer is awesome. I'm told in Portland it will be. And if any of you are marketers and want to come to Boston and rock out with us next summer, we're doing kind of a South by Southwest style party and a Gary Vee keynote. That code gets you 50% off, which you can't get right now. So LF50 if you decide to do it. Thank you very, very much.